One of the things that I found out when I was burned out is that there were two things that were always in common in the different seasons of burnout. One is that I was overcommitted. I had too many things on my plate. And the other is that I wasn't taking care of myself. That was the deadly equation for me. So the dam analogy is all about the fact that we are like a dam. All we're really doing is controlling the flow of energy that goes through us. And I know that sounds a little new age woo-woo, but think about it. We focus so much on our tasks, the things that we have to get done. So we get our job done. If we're volunteering or on a board or whatever, we get those things done. We get our outputs, the energy that flows out of us. We're pretty good at that part.
Welcome to the Real Estate Mogul MD podcast. Thanks for tuning in and taking control of your financial future. This is a show where we not only motivate and inspire, we give you actionable real-world experience to help you live life by design. You'll hear journeys and stories from other physicians, investors, coaches, consultants, and entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, Brett Riggins. That dam analogy. Well, what does it take for us to really understand what we are doing here? What we're doing in this moment? What are we reaching for? What are we stressing for? What are we going after? How is that affecting our family? How is that affecting who we're becoming? You know, a lot of times when we talk about finding our why and understanding what our passions are, real estate is a path that helps us get there. But I always say it's not the goals that we're setting, it's who we're becoming, who we have to become to reach those goals. And today we're talking about that burnout, that path, the journey of a high performer to get to where we're going. But how do we get rid of that? How do we reduce being overwhelmed? How do we regulate our emotions on that journey? Well, today's conversation is with a dentist, a husband, a father, a keynote speaker, an elite success coach, an author, a pilot, a mountain climber, and a recovering triathlete. Can you see how burnout happens with all that on your plate? Well, we're going to figure out that path. He's going to share his journey, and now he's able to help others understand where they're at, what they're reaching for, and man, just share in the presence of the moment. That is so beautiful. It makes me so happy. Everybody, please welcome to the show, Eric Recker. Eric, welcome to the show, man. How is it going today?
It's going well, Brett. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about this a lot, but what does it feel like to be Eric today?
Oh, that's a great question. What it feels like to be Eric today is I'm kind of in a season where I have sort of one foot in two different careers. So I'm still practicing dentist. I see patients 3 days a week. And then the other 2 days, or as it spills into the weekend, I work on coaching and speaking and writing. So today, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday with patients, Thursday, Friday with all the other stuff. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm kind of getting started in that second part of the week right now.
That's great. And tell us a little bit about your journey then. Why coaching? I mean, what do you mean coaching, and why not being a dentist full time? So tell us a little bit about that journey for you.
Yeah. So it involves a lot of burnout. So I think that's pretty common for many of us as medical professionals, but I can go way back to some words that were spoken to me on the recess playground playing kickball in Iowa in the early 80s. I was told that I wasn't good enough to play. And so because of that, I took those words and said that I was going to be so good at everything that I ever did that no one would ever not pick me. So basically, I formed this broken soundtrack in my mind, and I lived on that for a lot of years. So nothing that I did was ever good enough for me. It wasn't good enough to be in the top 15 in my dental school class. I had to be in the top 10. It wasn't good enough for me to start running. I had to do marathons. Triathlon wasn't good enough. I had to do Ironman triathlon, mountain climbing, all of that stuff. in addition to being in a very, very busy practice. And so what that did is when I never thought I was good enough, I ended up running myself into the ground. I found out that I had way too many things on my plate. And so around just before COVID, I started toying around with the idea of selling my practice and walking away from dentistry, because it felt like that was the only way to get out of this burnout. It was just, I had chest pain, heart palpitations, panic attacks. I had all that stuff going on, and it was going on regularly, and it was really scary. And I was concerned that I wasn't going to have much of a life left if I didn't do something. So I made plans to sell my practice. Long story short, but that fell through, and that was not able to happen. So I had to step back and realize, what is it that I really want with this life? How do I want to move forward? So currently I have a partner in my practice. I sold 50% of my practice. And part of that, the reason for doing that is I knew that I couldn't keep going at the pace I was. And a new desire was awakened in me, a new passion to help other people on their journey. I don't want people to go as far down the burnout road as I did. I don't want people to have these severe panic attacks and be paralyzed and not know how to move forward. So I am using what has happened with me in my life and trying to help other people on their journey.
And how in the world were you able to take that all the way back to the playground and understand that that primal question, am I good enough? How did all that, I mean, you didn't just come to that like as an epiphany, a dream, right? How did that work out?
Yeah, so it's crazy. I had totally forgot that I said those words. I'd always remembered that there was some bullying and some stuff like that was going on. But when COVID hit, it was uncharted territory for all of us. But for me, my dental practice was closed for 8 weeks. And we knew that it was going to be closed for a while. We didn't know how long. And I don't know about you, Brett, but I'd never done a Zoom webinar before. I'd never done any of that stuff. And information was coming at us 1,000 miles an hour. I could have sat and watched webinars 36 hours a day and never repeated content. It was just coming so fast with what we were going to need when we went back to work with our PPP, with the, PPE, and then the PPP loans and all of this stuff. So I knew that I needed to have some quiet in the midst of all of the noise. So I committed to something that was radically different than what I had ever done. I committed to 30 minutes of quiet a day. That is what I was going to do the whole time my practice was closed. I knew when it opened back up, it would be hit the ground running, be ready to go. So in those times of quiet, I got to a place where I could get really deep in my reflection. And that's where some of those ideas and thoughts from the past started coming back to me. So it wasn't just out of the blue. It was over time I remembered, oh yeah, I started hating Monday mornings because of bullying when I was in 2nd and 3rd grade. I remember dreading laying in bed waiting for the alarm clock to go off. Things like that. So it just gradually started coming back to me, and I started getting more in touch with my past and some of the things that had happened to form the way that I was. And at the same time, I was learning more about some of those repetitive thoughts that we have in our head that we continue to say to ourselves that become our identity. So really, in the scope of that 8 weeks, I probably did about 5 years worth of work on myself to try to realize, why am I the way I am, and how do I want to move forward from here?
Yeah. And so many times, and I talk about this all the time, the thoughts that we have create the actions, that we do. These feelings, these emotions are because we are our biggest influencer. We're constantly telling ourselves these things, and our brain does its job to make what we say come true. So in these moments of how we feel about money, the way that we've been conditioned about money, are we good enough? Am I successful? That's the one that I struggle with. That's my question. Am I successful? And it creates these high performance people based off of these things that happened to us so long ago. And now fast forward into this place where we've creating these machines that basically eat us, trying to make up for these simple things, simple, not easy, simple things from so long ago. And now you're in a successful business owner as a dentist, and it's just not somewhere where you want to be. And you feel that you made the decision to sell. Tell us a little bit about that. You have a private practice. Do you also own the real estate, or do you rent the real estate?
Yeah. So I own the real estate, own the practice. Part of me working so hard, so crazy hard, I was in a good position when I was ready to sell the practice. I was debt free. So own the real estate outright, own the practice outright. I was flush. So that gave me more options, which was great. Yeah. It was really good. But when I started talking to to Jeff, who is now my partner, he was in another practice. And I said, well, I want to sell you part of the business, and, I'm going to hang on to the real estate. And he said, hey, I'm leaving a good thing as well. So if I'm coming, it's a burn the ships moment for me, and I want half of everything. So my practice management consultant said, no way, Eric, you cannot do this. You can't go 50-50 on somebody that you've spent less than 10 hours of time total with. And I looked at him and I said, Matt, I was going to sell and walk away completely. If it doesn't work out, that's still what I'm going to do. So currently we are both 50-50 owners in all of it, and it has just been fantastic. It's worked out really, really well. We're able to make decisions together. I found out that was part of what was burning me out so much, is those big decisions I had to make by myself with 18 people around. And you're constantly thinking about their livelihoods, providing jobs for them, making sure they're secure, and then all the things that come up in a day. So-and-so's got, my front desk has this issue going on. One of my hygienists has this issue going on. Our compressor goes down, the server, all of that stuff. All of that is spinning around in your head constantly. And now with a partner, we share all of that. And that really is what has saved my dental career.
That's amazing. And it's so tough. I mean, you made a big jump, because partnerships is so hard. It's so difficult, because so much of it comes down to finding that right person where your values align. In this crazy time, or this crazy opportunities, when that happens, it can be great. But yeah, jumping right in that 50%, is tough. And I'm sure you probably heard, at least 51, 49 and all this kinds of stuff that happens around those discussions. But you made the jump, and you're off, enabling you to set yourself free a little bit. And the interesting piece there, why I talk about real estate there, is when you have a business operating out of real estate, it gets really sketchy if it's a 50-50 on the business, but not a 50-50 on the real estate, then there's always going to be a problem there. But real estate in whole is a wonderful, and we're on the Real Estate Mogul MD podcast. So of course we want to talk about real estate a little bit. This path, so selling, half of the practice, and now moving into this journey of coaching, helping others get to where you're headed, right? I don't know we're ever there. It's the journey that we're talking about here. And there's also, in this process, there's this book. Congratulations, first of all, writing a book. I know the journey. It's tough. There's a lot of work, but there's so much joy that comes in sharing that as well, too. On top of, Eric, all right, we talk about real estate for passive income. There's this other thing about passive income. When you write a book, I absolutely love. Obviously, when we go out, we want to share, we want to help people. But this thing creates income, and that check that you get from Amazon, even if it may be, just a few dollars a month, that passive income from that book, I absolutely love. So hopefully you get to experience a little bit of that too. But congratulations, by the way. Tell us a little bit about the book.
Yeah, so the book is a big part of my journey. One of the things that I found out when I was burned out is that there were two things that were always in common in the different seasons of burnout. One is that I was overcommitted. I had too many things on my plate. And the other is that I wasn't taking care of myself. That was the deadly equation for me. So the dam analogy is all about the fact that we are like a dam. All we're really doing is controlling the flow of energy that goes through us. And I know that sounds a little new age woo-woo, but think about it. We focus so much on our tasks, the things that we have to get done. So we get our job done. If we're volunteering or on a board or whatever, we get those things done. We get our outputs, the energy that flows out of us. We're pretty good at that part. Maybe we're distracted. We're not so good at using our time, but we find a way to get most of that stuff done. What I find is that we're not very good at taking care of ourselves. We have to have some inflow. So a dam works, we have a lake on one side and we have a river on the other side, or some sort of an outlet on the other side. If we don't pay attention to how much we're filling up the lake, we're going to get drained. And when we get drained, there is a bottom of that lake. And the bottom of that lake probably has some snags on it. Maybe a boat sank there. Maybe there's something down there. We're going to catch on those snags. And then we're going to end up making bad decisions. We're going to end up being reactive to those who are important to us. Those days when we come home and we have nothing left in the tank and our family asks us an innocent question and we tear their head off because we don't have anything left and we're reacting out of being empty. So basically, the book is about strategies for inflow. How can we better take care of ourselves? But even before that, how can we be very aware of where we are? Because what we do is we lie to ourselves. We tell ourselves that on a 1 to 10 scale, 1 is completely empty and 10 is completely full. We tell ourselves we're a 7 or an 8. We're not. We're probably a 3, 4, or a 5. But if we keep operating as a 7 or 8, we're getting drained, we're getting drained, we're getting drained. And that's when we start feeling burnout. And burnout's one of those words that I think a lot of people are burned out on hearing the word burnout. But there's a spectrum of burnout. Maybe you're overwhelmed. Maybe you're torched. Maybe you're just bored with how life is going. There's a whole lot of different ways to say that. You don't really have to be to the point of having panic attacks, chest pain, heart palpitations, all of that. Your life might just be kind of gray. You might not be able to find any excitement in your life anymore, which is another sign that you're getting burned out. So basically, the book is just a manual for better living, for self-awareness, and how to take better care of ourselves.
That damn analogy.
Yep.
Right. That damn analogy. How to fill up, stay up, and impact the world following a few simple steps. And I think you just touched on a lot of those, but just really that understanding of how you're feeling and really what you're reaching for, and finding that path to really allow you to make the decision to be happy, and be happy not only with where you're at, some of us with what we have, but with who we've become. And it's interesting, when you talk about that gray area, or maybe there's not something exciting. I feel, or have you felt, Eric, where you get to this point where now 2-3 days a week, you've taken this other direction, you're sharing this path with other people. Do you ever feel guilty where you're not in that high performance mode, where you're not pounding the stuff out, or where you've created a systems and processes and it's doing the job and now I'm just sitting back in the sunshine? Do you feel guilty when that happens?
I have had to come to peace with that. I have a lot of patients who have put some guilt on me. well, you need to be in the office more. I can't believe you only work 3 days. I love that line. You only work 3 days. Well, if I do the numbers in 3 days of clinical time versus 4 days, I should have dropped off by 25%, right? My production should have dropped off by 25%. It's only dropped off by about 10 to 15%. So I'm being more efficient in the days that I'm there. And then on the other days, the problem is, and it's sort of a problem. I love helping other people. I love relationships. I love coaching people. I love giving talks and workshops and keynotes to people. I really love that. So I have to be careful because Thursday and Friday, it is easy for me to work really, really hard on those days. I enjoy it, but it's easy for me to work really, really hard because I'm always working on my talks, always working on perfecting my craft, getting better, getting a little bit better each day. So I'm working more hours than what I was before I started this. I'm just working fewer hours in my dental practice.
And that stress, would you say that that's lightened up because of you're working more on the passion side of things?
It has. It's definitely lightened up. And I'm more aware of it. I'm more aware of it when it starts popping up. So had a recent experience where just kind of had the early signs of the walls closing in, like it was going to be one of those former panic attack sessions. And I was able to just step back. I had a couple minutes in between patients. I went downstairs to my office in my practice. I got out my journal and I just wrote about what I was feeling. I was honest with myself, and I wrote it out and took a couple minutes for some really good deep breathing. And then I went back to work. And that is not what would have happened in the past. But because I have taken the time to work on myself, I now know what some of that looks like before it actually happens.
Self-realization is the foundation of self-development. When we can understand how we're feeling, and then we can start to say, hey, what's making me feel this way? And either avoid or adjust in those scenarios. This to me sounds like, and I'm not trained in psychology or anything like that, but have you spoken with psychologists? I mean, because all of this to me, it sounds like, on this personal development path where we're understanding these things about ourselves. Have you sought out psychologists to help you reach those moments of self-realization?
Mostly I've spent a lot of time in quiet. I just have spent a lot of time in quiet, a lot of time journaling. I see a number of therapists in my practice. And so I'm always talking about things with them, proof of concept, ideas that I have, affirmation from them. I fortunately have great relationships with most of my patients that have been forged over a long time, so we can have those level of conversations. I work with a mentor. I have my own coach. And so it's just a lot of those discussions, being deep in relationships and not being afraid to be vulnerable. I think where we're at right now, a lot of people are extremely isolated. They don't have much of a network. And so when we're alone with our thoughts and we don't have other people to process those thoughts with, life can be pretty scary. And so I think it's super important that we have people in our lives who can help us walk the journey. If you don't have those people, the cool thing is you can see a therapist, you can get a coach, you can get one of those relationships fairly easily. You just have to be willing to be vulnerable and be honest about where you're at. And that was one thing that I just knew I needed to do right away, was be honest about my journey. So there's very few questions with me that are off limits. I'll tell anybody my story, the highest highs, the lowest lows, the mountaintop experiences, the deep valleys. I just think it's important that we do that if we want to move forward.
Yeah. And just back to that reflection, self-realization, those things are huge. Giving yourself the time to quiet down the rest of the world, to have that conversation with you, but with yourself, but then having the opportunity to connect with others too, to help you understand the things maybe that you're not seeing that they see, or bouncing experiences off of somebody who may have had that experience already. Very interesting. Back in the time when you were pushing, prior to this change in your life, and you're pushing so hard and really answering that internal question, am I good enough? How did that have anything to do with the money or the materialistic things that are produced by having a successful practice?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had a lot of insecurities around money, a lot of insecurities. So I remember so in 2008, I was in the process of building a new practice. I was also buying my practice from my father, and I had to equip a whole new practice with dental equipment. So those three big things led to over $2 million in debt. And so at that point, I was just a little bit over 30. I was 32 years old at the time. And oh, by the way, I was also training for 2 Ironman triathlons, coaching both of my kids in soccer, and I was on 5 boards at the time. So I was, that frog in the boiling water doesn't notice. You put it in lukewarm water, turn the heat on, it doesn't notice until it's boiling. Well, that's when I found out I was boiling. That's that overcommitted and not taking care of myself. But yeah, I was really, really, really concerned about money, because there was a point where if something would have happened to me and I wasn't alive anymore, there were a few years it would have been pretty tough on my family. It really would have been. But fortunately, instead of just having fear about that money, we lived about as lean as we could. We made good choices, and we saw that debt as an anchor, and we wanted to lighten up that anchor. So I always have to keep my money thoughts in check. I always do. It's easy for me to slip into a scarcity mentality and get away from that abundance mentality. But it's an easier reframe now than what it used to be, because I know I tend to go that way.
Scarcity mentality, abundance mentality. How in the world do we maintain an abundance mentality when we're living lean?
Yeah. So, well, it depends if you're living lean, if you're forced to live lean, or if you're just trying to live lean to get out of debt.
If you're living lean because that anchor is holding you down. Yeah.
So I think one of the biggest things is learning to live in the present moment. Okay. So oftentimes we're either stuck in the past or we're worried about the future. And so we miss the present moment. Not everything we do has to cost a lot of money. And so in those times when we're trying to live really lean, what are some simple pleasures that can really get us from thing to thing? So it would be great to have a whole bunch of vacations. But if you're in that season where you're trying to live really lean, maybe instead you go camping for a weekend. Maybe instead you just set up half a day where you can go hiking and do something that doesn't cost a lot of money. Maybe you even just set up a time to cook a meal together over the weekend and sit down and watch a movie and really just be present and enjoy that. So I think there's this lie that we keep having to spend all this money to get all these experiences, when we have all these simple experiences that are available for us that don't have to be very expensive. And then we start looking at the world differently. If we can get a ton of joy out of a pizza and a Sunday night movie, then we're not going to need to spend as much money trying to get all of these experiences. It's great to do that. Believe me, I love it. I love to be in the mountains. We travel a lot. But during that time, we had to find joy in a lot smaller pleasures than those big things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Definitely a challenge. But then it like you're saying I keep hearing you say experience. And a lot of times the experience is something that costs us the least. It costs us our time and our attention. And those are the moments that last forever as well, too. So very, very interesting. The 2 million in debt that was kind of anchored you in this moment that we were talking about. How can we be focused on abundance when we're living lean to this anchor? Did that include the acquisition of the real estate as well in that 2 million?
I was building a building, buying the practice, and I was doing the equipment all at the same time. And by the way, I've never owned a dental practice or a business before. So it was all of it at the same time.
Wow. So, and I love having these conversations because it's like, okay, how in the world did you even understand what you could afford? What's the range? How am I going to finance this? How is that going to work with cash flow? So all of these things that bear in, and a lot of times we throw ourselves into the fire and cross our fingers and hope that it works, right? And the other thing that's interesting too, I hear this a lot, Eric, is when you went to sell the business, then there's this thing called EBITDA. And right, and you start, like, how many of us even know what that is, or understand that process, or what that means, or where it even comes from? Were you aware of that? I'm thinking that's how you evaluated the business in order to come to that sale price, right?
Yeah. So I had a practice valuation done, and so I used my practice consultant, and I paid him, and he came up with a practice valuation, and then also had the latest real estate appraisal. So those were really the two big numbers that we put together in figuring out the price.
Nice. And there was the way that practice valuation was set up. And I'm new to all of this stuff, but it's interesting to me. And I'm sure a lot of the listeners, going through this for the first time or considering it in the future, that EBITDA is this basically a printout of your finances. And then there's sometimes a multiple placed on that to create this value. Did you dive into that, or did the consultant explain that process with you?
He did. So he did 3 different valuations based on 3 different strategies. And then we averaged out those 3 valuations is how we got there. So based on production and collections, number of active patients, lot of data. I'm sure thankful that I could pay him to do it. I did some of my own checks on my own, used some other formulas that I could find online just to kind of compare where he was coming from, and it all kind of lined up in the same area.
And that was nice that although the first deal didn't go through, but you had that knowledge or experience moving into the second opportunity where you sold 50% of the practice.
Yeah. And the sale going through, I tell you what, that's a whole podcast in itself, how it didn't go through the first time. My associate who was going to buy the practice from me was in a horrific car accident on a Monday morning on his way to work. Oh,
goodness.
So imagine being as burned out as you possibly can, and you've got this little flicker of hope. And it's a Monday morning at 7:45. He's not at our morning huddle. We can't get a hold of his wife. And then all of a sudden, we hear sirens. And the accident happened about a half mile away from our practice. Wow. It was a miracle that he survived. Very serious injuries. But what it forced me to do is step back and realize that he was not ready to own a practice. And so that's when I had to just step back and say, okay, what is it that I really want? Boy, if I run away from dentistry, burnout is going to follow me. If I just escape and don't do the work that I need to do, I'm not going to be any different off than I am right now. So, and if I want to coach and speak, especially to dentists, it's probably a good thing that I'm still seeing patients, just as far as my credibility goes. So I am not happy that he got in a car accident by any way. That's terrible. I'm sad that that's part of his journey. But the way that was redeemed even though it was a bad thing, was that I got a chance to move in a different direction. So I'm not thankful that it happened to him, but I am thankful for the path forward and how that's all worked out.
And this 2 to 3 days now that you've separated from practicing, still practicing, that is important. Not as much authority, but just to maintain something. There's something inside of you that took you to being a dentist. And that thing is still inside of you. And just to be able to feed and nurture that is really important, because that's what's created Eric. That's what's created you. And there's something in there to maintaining that, nurturing that, staying in touch with the business, staying in touch with associates. That's a great thing as well too. But now on this other side, there's this 2 or 3 days that you are speaking, you are coaching. And I've got your website here, Recker.com, right? That's ERICRECKER.com. That the listeners can find out more about you and connect with you. You say coaching and speaking a lot, and that's going to be based around just this dam analogy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so much fun. I love to come into businesses. The last group that I spoke to, there were about 100 dentists and dental professionals in there. And we just went through and we start off with an honest assessment of where we're at. And then we talk about how we get there. Then we talk about our commitments and living in the present. And then I'd like to finish that session up with a really cool mountain climbing story and some lessons that I learned from that can apply to anyone, whether you like endurance sports and adventure or whether you're just trying to get through a Monday. So I love it. The energy is always good when we have that. I've even gotten service technicians to talk and share during those times. So it works with a wide variety of groups. I love doing it. I love doing it for healthcare groups, dentists, medical professionals, just because they get it. We're all on some level of that spectrum of burnout, or we've experienced it at some point. We have this one shot at life. I love to get in there with people and help them have confidence that good days are going to be ahead.
And this hashtag win the now, it makes me wonder, what's the best advice that you have to be present? Be present in the moment.
Yeah. So one of the biggest presence killers that we have are our phones and our technologies, right? We all go to a restaurant and we see families that everybody's on their devices. So one of the biggest things that I have done that's made a big difference for me is I just ask myself the question, why am I picking this up? So if my phone's in my pocket, safely in my pocket, and there's a notification, and I'm in a situation where the moment is going to be ruined if I pick it up, I have to ask myself, why am I picking this up? Is it worth ruining this moment to pick it up? So I think we have to be really careful with our relationships with our phones. So that's one of the biggest things. The other, probably number 2 on that, would be having a recentering phrase. So when we find ourselves drifting away from the moment, if we're having a conversation with somebody and we feel our mind kind of taking that commercial break, right, where we're thinking about something else, just reminding ourselves, having a phrase like, I am here, I am right here, this is right now. Something along those lines to just bring you back to the moment, because the moment is the most important thing that we have, what's right in front of us.
Have you read the book, The Power of Now?
I have not.
Boy, that is an amazing book. Let's see, the author, Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle,
I'm familiar with
power.
him.
The Power of Now. It's great. Like everything that you're talking about is 100% aligned with this idea. And when we're present in the moment, nothing else exists. And that's where we're all aiming to be? Is it possible to be 100% present in the moment? For not likely. For some people who are able to quiet in the world and and teach and train yourself to get there. And the advice that you have is great. Even this, I am present. This is the moment. I am now. Like having these recentering things allow us to then train ourselves and get back. But ultimately, a great book. I love it. I listen to books too, and I can hear there's this triangle ding when they basically ask you to take action, or in this moment of being present and now. So every time I hear this triangle ding, I'm like, oh, I am now. This is now, right? This is the moment. If we could go back 10, 15 years ago, Eric, with what you know now, the experiences that you have now, and you had set beside somebody maybe considering buying a dental practice or considering to coach their children's sports while training for triathlons, while owning a practice, what would be the one thing that you would tell that person if you had this knowledge and experience from today? You could go back 10 or 15 years and tell this person what?
I would say spend some time and figure out your why. Figure out your purpose. Why are you here? What do you want to accomplish? What is your purpose for being on the earth? Spend some time and figure that out. And then when you're doing that, do the things that you're looking at adding to your life, do they complement that why? Because we are a society of more. We always add more. If, I'm not feeling well, I need to add a pill, or I need to add therapy, or I need to add all of these things. And then, oh, by the way, I already added all of these other things because of another problem in my life. I think sometimes we just need to say, maybe the answer isn't more, but it's being really good at a smaller number of things. So you just can't be everything to everybody. So know your why, and then count the cost of the things that you're adding. Are those things? I recently had to let go of a commitment. It was a good commitment. It was being on the consistory, the leadership group at my church. And in this season, as I would go to the meetings, I just knew that it was not aligning with my why for this season. I just wasn't fully there. I'm great in a meeting. I'm great in a meeting with a small group of people. I process really well with, maybe 10 or fewer people. These were big meetings with a lot of information thrown at us, and then we went home. And so I had to say, I am not willing to trade that chunk of time for that experience because it doesn't align with my why. So I know that was a long answer to what you were asking, but I really think we need to step back and take some time and understand what is our why, what is our purpose, what are we trying to accomplish?
What if we don't know our why?
There are a lot of great resources for figuring out your why. One of the most simple it's just called the 7-layer why. And you just write on a piece of paper, what do I want to do? So maybe it's, I want to buy a dental practice, or
why?
I want to be a coach. I want to be a speaker. And then you ask yourself, why do I want to do that? And then you get an answer. And then you ask it again. Why do I want to do that? Why do I want to do that? Why do I want to do that? And you get 7 layers deep. And by the time you get to 7 layers deep, you're starting to find the reason behind the reason. Very
interesting. I like that. I've definitely heard that in different platforms too, for different really peeling the onion back, really getting down to that core reason of what's causing this. Well, so much stuff here, Eric. Thank you so much for your time. The listeners, again, can go to ericrecker.com, RICRECKER.com. Connect with Eric, reach out to him, learn more about his process, the product, the service that he's at now, but it's through his experience, through his journey. And I think we all connect with you, Eric, on this path to figure out why. Why are we here? How can we be present in the moment? Because it gives me goosebumps to even think about the idea of being present in the moment with our family. And again, you being present here with us, Eric, thank you so much. Hope you enjoy the rest of your year here, and then enjoy the rest of your journey moving forward. And we just hope that you are able to connect with so many others out there to help bring that joy that you have now to others.
Thanks, Brett. I really appreciate the encouragement, and I wish you all the best as well.
Thank you so much. And to the listeners out there today, thank you for your presence today. A lot of times I know that you may be listening to this maybe in your car or in a medical office or maybe while you're training for a triathlon, wherever it may be. We are so grateful that you've given us your attention. And that attention today, I want you to place that to finding your why and finding that point of now. And whether it takes connecting with Eric, reading the Damn Analogy book, The Power of Now is also another great book. Eckhart Tolle talks a lot about this. Wherever it is or however you get there, when you're there, you'll know. Just like the why. When you find it, you'll know. But it takes attention to get there. And again, thank you for your attention today. This is the Real Estate Mogul MD.